Hi again, welcome back. Here we are to continue our discussion of CSS. We're talking about position absolute and position relative. So in our last video, we created some divs. We've made two divs that are children of a container, and the container has been set to position relative, right? And the container is this box with a black outline, right? And then the two inner boxes are position absolute. So using position absolute, we can use the top, left, right, and bottom properties to position an element. And we can use the z-index property to set their stacking order, okay? I'm gonna, I'm gonna remove the stacking here, the z-index, right? And now we can see the blue box is in front of the red box. So how does this work? Let's get a little more into this, right? What would happen if we were to take this red box and put it inside of the blue one, okay? So let's imagine here, like I take this box and I put it inside here. So what's going to happen is the red box, now you can see it's top of 5 and right of 5. It's 5 pixels from the top of the blue box and 5 pixels from the right of the blue box. The blue box is 50 pixels or 60 pixels from the right edge of its container, right? So what's happening here, and let's actually change this. Let's make this the left, and then let's give it a top property too. Let's give it a top of 40, okay? So you'll notice the red box moved with the blue box as I did that, okay? So blue box is 60 from the left, 40 from the top, okay? What's happening is the blue box is position absolute, so it looks up the DOM chain here until it finds a relative or absolute parent, and that element becomes the positioning context. So in our case, container is relative, so container determines where the left, top, or right, and bottom positions are, and we take our measurements from there, okay? The box A right here, the red box, is doing the same thing, but it looks up and it sees the blue box as its parent and uses that as the positioning context, okay? So let's try one more thing. What if I remove the absolute position from the blue box, okay? So when I do that, you can see the blue box no longer collapses around its parent. Left and top properties have no effect. And the red box is now looking past the blue box. It goes to here and says, hey, you're not relative or absolute. I'm going to look up to here and see that the container is relative. So I'm going to use this to find my measurements. Okay. Now it kind of looks like it's on the edge of this, but you'll see if I change the width of the blue box, if I say width of 100, then the red one is indeed using the outer box, the black border, the container, right, as its positioning context, right? It's kind of ignoring the blue one, right? So again, left and top don't have any effect unless you're position absolute, and it doesn't matter where you're nested, right? You're always going to keep working your way up the DOM tree until you find something that is your positioning context when you're absolute positioned, okay? I'm going to do one more example here. I'm going to move this back to what we had before, and I'm going to put the white or the red box outside of the other one, right? Here we go, right? So I got my my two boxes just like we did before, right? And what I want to do this time is I'm going to remove position absolute on both of these guys, right? So there we go, right? So now they're both position absolute, right? And this guy just happens to have a width of 100. This guy doesn't have a width, so it expands to fill the container. What happens if we do position relative? Okay, and position relative actually doesn't matter. It doesn't look for a positioning context. So I'll even remove position relative from the container. Okay, so let's do the first box. So remember also that when pardon me, when you're position absolute, the Other elements around you ignore your positioning context, or I should say, ignore you when they find their position, right? Sorry, that didn't make any sense, right? So let's change. Let's actually put position absolute back on just for a moment, right? So you'll see, remember, I did this example before, is if I make the red box position absolute, the blue one ignores it. So it starts at the top and it just would get stacked up, right? So what if I make the red box position relative? Looks just like it did before. There's no change. This is the same as without. So it's essentially relative looks the same as static, right? Okay, so what's the secret then for relative? Well, if there were any child elements that were position absolute, they would look for this element to set their context. So that's one, okay? Two, when you're relative position, you can use the left, top, right, and bottom, but they have a slightly different effect, okay? So if I say top of 20 pixels, 20 pixels, and then I do left of, oh wait, I did left of 20, let's do top of 40 pixels. Sorry, I'm not typing well today. There we go, top of 40 pixels. What happens now? Weird. Wait, did you catch that? Let's try that again. What if I comment these out just for the moment here? This is what it looks like normally. We're relative position. Everything is acting and looking normal. If I apply the left property, though, I move 20 pixels to the left. If I apply the top property, I move 20 pixels or 40 pixels down. So what's happening here is that when you use relative position, right, the computer does the auto layout. It arranges everything like following the normal rules, okay? And then as a last step, it nudges the element based on the left, top, right, and bottom properties, but it doesn't upset the positioning of everything else, okay? Right? So it's just this element right here, the content box number 1, is positioned where it would normally go, like where, you know, the computer would normally figure out where it would be, and then these two numbers right here offset it from that position, right, without pushing anything else around. Okay? So there's relative position. Let's try it on the other box, right? So if, let's go to this box and do left of, let's do left of 40 pixels and top of 30 pixels. I don't know, right? Okay. So I put these in, nothing happens, right? Left, top, right, and bottom don't do anything unless we're position absolute or position relative, right? So let's do position and then set the position to relative. So now when I set position relative, imagine the layout would have happened exactly, as it would have been without position relative and without left, top, right, and bottom. And then this blue box is going to be pushed 40 pixels to the left and 30 pixels down, right? So now I'm 40 to the left and I moved 30 pixels down from where I normally would have been. So this applies to any kind of layout. So if we did layout in any other way, if there were any other things affecting the layout, the computer would figure out where we were, and then relative position would nudge us to the left or the top or the right or the bottom. Okay, so there we go. Let's do a quick. I know that's kind of a lot. It's kind of like you're an alchemist or a wizard. Like putting these CSS properties together, because behind the scenes there's a lot of rules that are attached to these properties, right? It's kind of a weird mathematics of some kind, right? Let's go over it again. So any element can be positioned, any element is positioned static by default, right? So if I set this to static, this is where it would normally be, okay? If we're positioned static, left, top, right, and bottom don't do anything, right? If we're positioned absolute, then an element finds it's not positioned by the computer, and it finds its position by looking for its positioning context. So the positioning context looks up the DOM tree and it finds a relative parent element or the body tag. So in my case, I'm using the body tag right now. If I was to set the container element to position relative, then the red box would use the container element as its positioning context. So now I'm 20 from the left and 40 from the top of the black outline box, right? Okay. When you're positioned relative, the computer does the layout as normal, and then after the auto layout is all done, then it's going to move you based on the left, top, right, and bottom properties. Okay? Right? So anyway, so I hope that that's interesting and maybe explains a little bit of the arcane side of position. And again, like the probably your best tools are Flexbox and Grid. But for certain things, like you got to use position absolute or position relative, right? Just certain situations. Don't reach for these tools first, though. It's just going to cause trouble, right, and heartache, right? You're going to not be happy, right? Usually Flexbox is the best tool for layout. Okay. So anyway, thanks for watching. I hope that that was an interesting discussion.